Good day everyone, Trainer Maxim with you. Thank you very much for joining me for the next episode of my podcast. Today we're going to talk about the muscle activation and the purpose with which you do that. As always, everyone, I really appreciate your support. Thank you very much for commenting, asking questions, watching. Thank you. Super thanks. Amazing. And of course, my support angels. I cannot say thank you enough. Thank you everyone for supporting my enterprise. Muscle engagement. Well, it's a bit tricky because every so often I'm being asked the question, hey Maxim, what do you think is the number? How hard I should engage my muscles during that or another exercise? Let's say for the squats. How much should I engage the quads versus hamstrings versus, is it 30% of the hamstrings and 60% of the quads and maybe glutes 40% or something like this? So a lot of times people do think in these terms, percentages, but let's see how it really works in terms of the brain work. So we know that muscles, let's say biceps has filaments, muscle filaments. It's a big string of fiber. Let's say if you picture a banana, that would be your muscle filament. You cut banana in 10 pieces. Each of those pieces will be representing a muscle cell. So those are your muscle cells. The muscle cells have a very interesting ability. Once they received the electrical signal from the brain, they go into the state of contraction. The inners of the muscle cells become contracting by pulling each side of the muscle cell to its midline. So every muscle pulls towards its midline because these muscle cells contract towards their midlines. And the other interesting part of the muscle cells is that in neuroscience, it's known as all or none law. Once the electrical signal came into the muscle cell contracts at 100%. Muscle cell will be shortened at 100% of its capacity. There is no partial contraction of the muscle cell. Muscle cell has no ability to contract by 20, 30 or 70%. Once the electrical signal came, it's 100% of the contraction. Electrical signal stops coming into the muscles, the muscle cells bounces into its normal shape, normal length, and that's it. So just by knowing this, we cannot say that we can actually shorten muscle but by 20%. We can't. Whatever the muscle cells are activated, they're always shortened by 100%. Though the other matter is how many of muscle cells are being recruited during that or another physical activity. That's a different question. So let's say our biceps has 1 million muscle cells. Those 1 million cells are connected to the motor neurons placed in your spinal cord. Motor neurons are special neurons which are connected at hundreds or thousands or even millions of muscle cells at the same time. And they're responsible for activation of the corresponding muscle cells. Let's say we have 1 million muscle cells in our biceps and say 10 motor neurons, each responsible for activation of 100 muscle cells inside the biceps. So 10 motor neurons, each connected to 100,000 muscle cells of your biceps. Collectively, they represent 1 million of the total muscle cells we have in the biceps. Of course, it's a made-up number. It's not a real number, just for the simplicity's sake. So now, depending on the workload you're about to deal with, let's say you decided to lift 5 kilos. If it's 5 kilos on the floor, then the brain will instruct only one motor neuron to fire. And that motor neuron will transfer the electrical activity to all the corresponding muscle cells connected to that same motor neuron. So only 100,000 muscle cells of your biceps will receive the electrical activity. And once that electrical activity received, all the muscle cells connected to that one single motor neuron will be contracted, shortened at 100%, producing a pull enough to lift 5 kilos. The rest, the other 900,000 muscle cells will stay dormant, unless you decided to add some weight and lift 25 kilos, then the brain will instruct 2 motor neurons to fire, activating 200,000 cells, and so on and so forth. But whatever number of muscle cells are being recruited, all those muscle cells are contracting at 100%. So we really cannot say that we're shortening the biceps only by 25%. It's a perception, but it's not incorrect. Whatever the number of the muscle cells recruited in the biceps, they're recruited and they're shortened at all time at 100%. And the reason why we think that it might be only 20% because the arm is not moving close, because the hand is not moving close to the shoulders, it's because not enough muscle cells are pulling on that arm. But if you activate all the muscle cells, recruit more muscle cells, more motor neurons, then the forearm will go close to the shoulder. But anyway, whatever number we activate based on the workload we're dealing with, those number of muscle cells are working at 100% of their shortening capacity, and that's it. And now our goal is to make sure that we have the ability to activate all those 10 motor neurons when the workload is becoming heavier. And that's why we progress with the weights slowly, giving the brain the time to learn how to activate more and more motor neurons as the workload increases. And that's how we become a little bit stronger. I will be expanding on this topic a little bit more in my next podcast about the strength. There are a couple of few mechanisms how we become stronger, but as of now, just know, guys, if you lift a little bit heavier, then the brain recruits more muscle cells and they all contract at 100%. Now, the other situation with the weightlifting or any other skills, that we try to think in the linear fashion. Linear fashion means one step at a time. We think that during that or another exercise, we need to first press with the chest, second extend the elbow, and etc. It's happening because we can express one thought at a time. We can say one word at a time. And that's why for us, for our consciousness, the world is pretty much linear, step by step. However, in the computational science, let's say computers, there is no such kind of thing as the linear implementation if we talk about the contemporary science with a lot of CPU cores, etc. Any task is run in parallel fashion on a lot of threads. What it means that anytime you want to open your laptop and fire, laptop is running thousands of tasks, like drawing that picture on that screen, lighting up that button at the same time, just on different threads, but in parallel fashion. And the computer is coordinating the execution of those threads to accomplish the general goal, to wake up your laptop, let's say, with a nice picture of your dog on the screen. Our brain is doing the same thing. When you decided to move, there is no such kind of thing as linear implementation of this step or the press. It's always parallel implementation, meaning that the brain will be sending the electrical activities to all the muscles responsible for that particular movement. At the same time, activating your biceps at the same time, triceps, whatever the movement you're doing, it's always parallel activation of your body. And now your goal is to make sure that parallel activation of your muscles are well coordinated. Then you might be hold up with one activation and speed up the other activation. So you have to know what movement you're dealing with, how the body works, etc., to understand which body part should maybe go first and second. But the brain will always try to activate everything at the same time. And that's where coordination comes very handy, so that we can synchronize the activity of the muscles and coordinate them in a very, very good way in order to produce a very smooth movement. So that would be the coordination. Now, the other interesting idea is that the intent with which you engage your muscles is very crucial and more important than the muscle engagement even. Well, it might sound very, very intuitive, and of course it makes sense, common sense. I need to activate the muscles with some intent, but it's not really that common as you might think. Let's say you're sitting right now in front of the computers, and if I ask you to engage your shoulders, engage your biceps, engage your forearms, engage the muscles of your fingers, try to do that. Try it? Okay. I think if you really try it, it's a thought experiment. In reality, you tense the shoulders, you tense the biceps, you tense the forearm, you tense the fingers, and, well, you did not scratch your head. Well, because actually I meant to ask you to scratch your head. Well, because to scratch your head, you need to activate your shoulder muscles to bring the upper arm up, activate the biceps to pull on the forearm, to bring the hand close to the head, and activate the muscles of the fingers so that you can scratch the head. But since I did not elaborate on my intent, I just instructed you to engage the muscles of your shoulders, engage the muscles of your biceps, engage the muscles of your forearms and the fingers. I just turned your arm into one foreign object for you. It became so stiff and immobile because you, just like that law in biomechanics and neuroscience, all or none, you tried to do your best. And because you tried to do your best with what I asked you to do, to engage those muscles, you engaged it so much, but with no purpose, no movement was produced. And I cannot blame you. How could you know that I meant to ask you to scratch your head? Of course, it's impossible. So my point is, if you just ask in your brain to engage the biceps, just tighten it up, and you actually don't know for what, you're not going to get a result out of that engagement. And even on the contrary, that engagement might hamper your activity currently going on. Let's say with the handstands, if you tighten up your core, but for what? What are you tightening it for? It will make the movement stronger. Well, do you really understand in which way? Do you really have a picture of what's going to happen when you're tightening the core? What is meant to happen? If no, that core engagement will make your handstands absolutely heavy and very, very laborious, because you will overdo this. Without the intent, you're not going to produce even simple movement. If I instruct you on how to how to engage your quads, engage your glutes, engage your core, what am I trying to tell you? Well, I'm actually meaning a step forward. For the step forward, I want you to activate your core with the quads, pull on your leg to bring it forward, and etc. But because I did not tell you that I meant a step forward, I just instructed you to engage all those muscles. You just turned your leg into, again, a foreign object. You just tighten it up for nothing. And that's what's going to happen with any performance. So very often when your coach or trainer tells you, when you do the bench press, just squeeze your chest more. Now, I encourage you to ask the trainer what for, what exactly should happen, how exactly that muscle should pull the chest, extra chest engagement, should pull on your arm. What movement it should lead to. Maybe it's a slight rotation of the upper arm, internally or externally, and movement that way. Because without that picture, you're just going to engage that muscle, and your bench press might become even heavier because you don't understand what's happening. You just engage in the muscles. So knowing the intent behind the muscle engagement is very important. And the benefit of it, when you know the intent behind my question, back to the scratching your head, if had you known that my intent was to ask you to scratch the head, you would have engaged those muscles with much less severity, with much less activation, sparing your resources, and scratch your head in a very casual manner, just like a movement, not like an exercise. That would have spared you a lot of efforts. And same with the exercises. When you really know the intent behind the muscle engagement, you might find that actually it doesn't require so much tension in the muscle. To tuck your chest ribcage in, you just need tiny activation of the core. You don't need to squeeze it all out, because without knowing the intent, you will squeeze it all out. Same with the leg, same with anything else. So that's why I encourage you to learn about the body mechanics, learn about the muscles, how they pull. Ask your trainers whenever they ask you to tighten something up without explaining how exactly it works, what exactly it will produce. Ask them to do so, because it will spare you a lot of times and efforts. Often with my students, they can get a result after 20 minutes of training just by knowing what that muscle engagement is going to produce in their body, just by knowing. Because when the brain knows exact picture, exact image, the intent behind the muscle engagement, the brain is going to engage your muscle in different sequence, with different coordination routine, with different severity of the engagement, with maybe less electrical activity sent to your fingers because scratching the head doesn't take a lot of effort. So you're becoming efficient. So see how just by learning the body, learning the intent behind the muscle engagement, you can become easily more efficient over the day. And yes, sometimes without the explanations, it might work just nicely, because sometimes in some movements, squats or bench press, there are maybe only 3 options in which your joint can be placed. And by instructing you to tighten up your glutes, you just got that bingo, that option at your first try. During the first attempt, you got it right. But it's actually by luck, and we cannot rely on luck. We want a calculated success in our training, highly calculated, highly understood success. When it's the case, the brain has the better picture on how to engage the muscles when you understand the success. Understand the mechanics. So I encourage you, as always, to learn about your body, to know how the bones move when the muscles are pulling on them, what exactly it means to activate the biceps or activate the tricep, what for, the intent behind this activation. That's what matters, not the activation itself. And also, I want you to step away from thinking that I want to engage that or another muscle by 60%, because now you know it's not really about that number. Besides, even if you know that number, we of course can calculate how much of the workload is being carried on the knees during the squats. This is the task for the biomechanics, physicist, or I don't know, whomever can calculate this amount of workload. But for you as an athlete, it will produce no meaningful changes. Now you know that the majority of the body weight is carried by that joint or another. Now what? Your main goal is just to make sure that all the activity, all the movements of your joints engaged in that activity, and the squats or handstands are synchronized to the point that it places your body as a structure overall in a very good mechanical positions. When you use the advantage of your levers, arms, legs, it's all levers, in order to spare your muscular efforts. So the goal is to engage the muscles less and get more power, more outcome out of the position by using the advantage of your levers, just like you would do with the car, or the rock, the heavy rock. You would rather to grab a very long stick to turn the rock over and do nothing almost, rather than using a stick 1 meter long and use a lot of muscular efforts, almost doing the deadlift with 500 kilos. Of course, the first option is more desirable. So same with the body. So step away from thinking percentage, just make sure that you coordinated the movements well. You know the intent behind the muscular engagement. You just don't engage the muscles for nothing. And you will be much better off. The success will come much faster. You will spare time, and most importantly, you will spare your body in terms of injuries, less injuries if you understand how the body works. And that's it, guys. I think you got the main point. Learn about the body more, train smart, casual cliches, okay? But they really work. Thank you very much for your attention. Trainer Maxim with you. I will see you in my next video. Now go and enjoy your day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.